What's up, guys? Welcome back to Blondes Building Equity. Today we have another special guest I'm super excited about because you guys know our long-term goal after flipping is getting into apartment complexes. So Tim Bratz, he owns 4,000 units. That's a lot of units if you guys don't know real estate terms. He's also a huge author, huge teacher, and just an amazing guy. So welcome on the podcast, Tim. Thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate all the value you guys put out there for other people and helping them out with their businesses and their lives. So it's an honor.
Oh, thank you so much. And a lot of our viewers are newer into real estate. So make sure you go in depth on things that you're talking about. But I want to hear from the beginning a little short synopsis of your story, how you kind of got started and where you're at now.
Yeah, for sure. So I was going through college when the last market was going gangbusters. 03 to 07, I was in college, and I saw all these people making all this money. And I was like, what are they doing? They were all doing real estate. And there were people who weren't that smart, where I was like, if they're making money, I'm going to get rich doing this stuff. You know what I mean? It's like kind of similar to what the market's been the past couple of years too. So I'm from Ohio originally, and my brother was living out in New York City, and he invited me out to live with him in New York City. I was like, well, I got free rent. Let me go out to New York after college. And so in 2007, I moved out to New York, and I thought you got started in real estate by becoming a real estate agent. So I got my real estate license, and I went and parked it with a commercial brokerage. And I started negotiating leases for retail spaces and office spaces. And I took, I'm sure you guys have been in New York City, but in Greenwich Village, there's a street called Bleecker and Thompson, kind of like a side street in the village. I found like a little 400 square foot space. I leased it out for the landlord, 400 square feet. So it's like the size of, 2 bedrooms. And we rented it for $10,000 a month on a 12-year lease term with a 4% annual increase in rents. And I just remember doing the math on this and realizing the landlord's going to make almost $2 million over the next 12 years for doing something once. And I was like, I'm on the wrong side of the equation. I need to be owning real estate instead of brokering real estate. So, it was a shitty winter. I decided to get out of New York City and I wanted to move down south. So I moved to Charleston, South Carolina. Beautiful town, really cool. And moved down there in summer of 2008 and went through the whole analysis paralysis phase I know a lot of people go through as they're trying to learn how to do real estate. I did the same thing. Took all the classes, jumped online, read all the books, and quickly realized I wasn't going to learn how to do real estate by reading about it in a book or by taking a course. I needed to jump in. It's like swimming. You can't read about swimming in a book. You have to learn how to swim by getting in the water. And real estate's the same way. Go out and take action is so important. And so I'm ready to jump in. I show up at the party, ready to start making offers. And all of a sudden, October of 2008 occurs and the whole friggin' world collapses. And everybody's running from real estate. Don't get into real estate. I show up to the party and everybody's running out the back door kind of a thing. And I'm like, what the hell? But the good news is all these properties started coming online at pennies on the dollar. And I'm like, dude, it was very different than today's market. Today's market, there's a lot of money out there and not as many deals. Back then, it was completely opposite. It was deals everywhere and money was much harder to come by, especially for a punk 23-year-old kid who'd never done a deal before in the worst housing recession ever. I had to get resourceful. I got to work. I talked to my friends. None of them had any money. They were all drinking at the bars. My parents weren't going to give me any money. They remember me getting arrested for underage drinking in college, right? So they didn't see me as a credible source on that front. And then the only person who was giving me money at the time was MasterCard. So I called up my MasterCard credit card company and I said, hey, can you guys increase my limit? And they increased to $15,000. And I found the cheapest dump property in the entire MLS in a rough neighborhood, and I went and bought it, did all the work on it, flipped it inside 110 days, and made 13 G's. It was the biggest check I ever made up to that point in my life. And I remember looking at the market thinking everybody is saying the sky's falling and run from real estate. And I just made the most money I've ever made from doing a deal in this market. And I quickly realized it's not about the market, right? Where everybody's talking about macroeconomics and they're reading the news headlines and all that stuff. It's inconsequential. What about your economy, not the economy, right? What are you doing? What is your business model? How do you buy? Do you buy for cash flow or do you buy for speculation, right? Are you buying at a retail price or are you buying at a wholesale price? Are you buying for a short-term, quick, get rich quick, or are you buying for long-term legacy kind of wealth? And that's really the difference, right? Then regardless of what market you're buying in, if you have sound fundamentals on how you're buying your rental real estate, you can make it through any sort of market.
So let's talk about your first deal. How much was it? And how much did you put into it? And did you finance everything? Because I know you said you got a $15,000 limit, but was that enough to buy the property and to put money into it?
It was enough to buy the property. So I found the cheapest house on the entire MLS, again, in a really rough neighborhood. And again, this is at the collapse of the market. So it was on the market for $25,000. I made an offer at 12. because there were deals everywhere, and who cares? They came back at 20, I came back at 14, and they ended up accepting it at $14,000. And then I had a few $1,000s saved up from doing deals up in New York, but I really just put lipstick on a pig. This place was a dump. I threw hunter green paint on the walls, and I didn't know. I found remnant carpet from Goodwill, and I literally paid my buddies in pizza and beer in order to get the thing done. And I took a piece of shit and I made it a prettier piece of shit, and then I just got somebody, like, this is actually wild, but I sold it to the guy who owned a commercial complex on the next street over. This is my entry into real estate. I was so proud of this property, and I sold it to the guy, and I went to go do a YouTube video on it a couple months ago, and I drove by the property. He friggin' tore it down and made it a parking lot.
Because it was that bad.
Oh my God.
It was that bad.
So how much money did you put into fixing it?
Like $5,000.
Because you did a lot of it yourself?
Like, legitimately, it was paint, and I did it myself, right? Like, I just got a can of paint, painted the whole place. I redid the landscaping, cut the grass, threw some mulch down. Like, I didn't even put plants in there. I just put mulch down as if it had a garden bed. And then I removed the bars from the windows, and I just cleaned the place up, put remnant carpet in, and then I held an open house, and I said, hey, come on out. So I know a lot of people like location, location, location for real estate, the number one rule, and I think that's very, very important. But I've made a lot of money in war zones, and I think the number one rule for me is always buying at a discount, right? Like wholesale, wholesale, wholesale. You make all the money when you buy the property. The renovations are usually a pretty fixed cost, and you can't play around with that. I know people try to make a deal work by scaling back the renovations. That's a bad idea. Just get better at negotiating, or get better at raising private money, or get better at securing funding at a lower rate. Like, there's a lot of other variables that you can reduce the overall expenses of the deal, specifically in the buying aspect of it. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity moving forward right now because of what's going on with interest rates and stuff. And I think that the buyers are going to see some sellers that kind of get slapped in the face a little and come back on their pricing and realize that it's not the same market as it was 2 years ago, last year, and even 3 months ago.
So I think a lot of people are really scared right now. Are you slowing down at all, or what would you tell people that are scared of the market crashing?
That's a great question. Jess, what I'll tell you is, like, the more successful the business people are right now, the more they're salivating, right? Like, I've been preparing the past 18 years of my life for the next 18 months of what's about to happen. I am ready, like, I'm getting ready to pounce on deals all over the place. I've developed the relationships. I know how to raise money. I know how to structure deals, right? And I know what I'm doing. I have a team built out. I've been preparing for this for the past 18 years for the next 18 months. And I think millionaires and billionaires will be made over the course of the next 18 months if you know what you're doing, right? You got to be skilled up. You got to have the insights, the knowledge. The mind game is bigger than anything else here. And then and realizing that you cannot get influenced by people who don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? Like, a lot of people who are doing the influencing are news reporters who don't know shit about real estate, you know? So it's like, why would I listen to that person when, you know, this other guy over here who's got 4,000 doors is excited about the market, right? Excited about the buying opportunities. And other people who have way bigger portfolios than me are all amped up about it. So it's been a good run. Hopefully you made some money. Hopefully you developed some connections. But I think the people who have the skill set of raising money, of sourcing deals, and have the relationships built.
So it's not all about having cash. It's not all about like, okay, now's the time to have cash. It's really like relationship and how to fund.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I have a lot of cash out in deals right now. I'm not very cash heavy. I'm very equity heavy. And I have a little bit of cash coming back in, but I'm not concerned about, and that's most real estate investors,
all
right?
of us,
You're
we're
either
cash broke every
cash
day.
heavy or equity heavy, never both at the same time. It's feast and famine cycles all the time, right? And that just gets amplified as you get into bigger and bigger deals. Like, we're doing distributions this week, and my chief investment officer is like, dude, I need 750 G's. I was like, here we go, So it's like, that just gets multiplied as you get into bigger portfolios. But I guess my point is, like, you don't need your own cash. I see a lot of people bottleneck themselves thinking, oh, I saved up $100,000. Let me go get into a deal. The problem with that is you only look at deals that you can leverage that $100,000 into. So you're only looking at deals where you say, hey, I could put 20% down on a $500,000 deal because I have $100,000. That, to me, it creates constraints, and I don't like that. I'd rather you come to me and say, hey, I don't have any money. I'd be like, oh, get ready. I'm going to teach you how to go out and raise millions, if not tens of millions of dollars of other people's money to then go and deploy in your own deals. Like, I own a $400 million portfolio. I've only put $125,000 of my own money in as an extra.
Wow. Did you guys really hear that? That's insane. You said how big? 400 million?
400 million. And I've only put 125 grand.
That's something we push so much.
So you don't need money, right? Like what I've been doing is deploying my like I spend multiple six figures a year on personal development, on getting in mastermind groups and getting in the right circles and, surrounding myself with people who know things that I don't know or who are in a position that I'm not in yet and getting their insights. And those relationships and the insights and the knowledge that you learn from that. I think relationship capital, right, and intellectual capital are the two most important things, the two highest returns on your investment.
And I think with like so many people getting started in real estate, that limiting belief of thinking you need capital, they're like, oh, I don't want to start in real estate because I don't have any money. That was our limiting belief for so long. We were agents for 5 years before, and we were like, we're going to build up our capital, get started in real estate, and like we're reading every single book. And so and then the second we dove in and realized how to leverage and raise capital, and just like it was like a rocket ship. And so if we can push anybody right now, that would be like, do not focus on making the money, focus on getting the knowledge and getting the relationships, because we talk about it all the time. Some people have money and some people have time, and those people who have a lot of money don't have time. So find them that deal and they will give you the money.
Also, another question I was going to ask is, for people that are listening, a lot of people ask us, because when we first started raising money, we also didn't realize how easy it was. Like the second person we called gave us $100,000. And we hadn't realized we had already nurtured all these relationships. They believed in us. They had been watching us for years. And so the second that we asked for money, they gave it to us because they trusted us. So where would you tell people to go to source money when they're first starting and they have no clue how?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Like you guys are in a little bit different position because you kind of have that influence, right? Like Kinsey's got 3 million followers on Instagram, and I think you're at 30 or 50 or something like that. So you guys both have pretty big followings. There's people who already see you. I was texting back and forth with Kinsey, like you are one of the coolest chicks I know, right? Because you're doing cool shit all the time. You're in helicopters, you're traveling around the world, you're doing real estate deals. I was like, damn, like that's really cool. And so you already have that trustworthiness and you have the credibility, right? And those are the two characteristics. Like if there's anything anybody who's listening to this writes down, it's the two characteristics that you need for influence in anything, and especially in raising private money, is trust and respect. And the more you can develop trust and respect, you'll source deals. You'll have people who want to join your team and work for you for free. You'll have people who want to lend you money based on your reputation without even needing the paperwork, right? Like I've done enough deals with people and I've shown them over and over and over again that I have character and I'm trustworthy and I have competency in order to do this, that I can get 7-figure checks on a text message, right? And then they're like, send the paperwork later kind of a thing. So as you continuously work that muscle and continuously increase the respect that you have in your community and your circle of influence and increase the trust that you have in that circle of influence, then it's easier and easier to raise money. So I think social media is a game changer. It is the best marketing tool that has ever been out there. And if you can just create content and show people you know what the hell you're talking about, you will get followers. There are people who are following you on social media right now that don't even know that you guys raise money. Like you should be talking about this on your social medias especially, but really all of us need to be doing more of it. So like what's something you could, well, Tim, I'm not really a social media influencer, right? Well, what could you do? Maybe you can go and walk a property and talk about the kind of flooring that you used and why you picked that backsplash and why you picked that tile and why, like anything like that, why you picked that location. Go over the numbers, go over how to underwrite a deal. Shit that's really mundane and basic to you and me that we do on a daily basis. Like why would anybody want to know like how to do this? Dude, that's why HGTV even exists, is because so many people want to learn that stuff. And to just educate somebody, even if it's not content coming from you, what if you interviewed your contractor? I think I saw you guys do that not too long ago. What if you interviewed your CPA? What if you interviewed your attorney? What if you interviewed another real estate agent or somebody, or the seller? I've even seen people interview the seller. Why'd you sell to me? Why'd you do this? How'd that conversation go, right? I think that's cool perspective, and it's things that people don't usually see on HGTV, right? They just see the glamour on that. Like really getting into the nuts and bolts of how do you formulate a deal.
I think that's such good advice. That's what Gary Vee always says, is like, you don't have to plan content. And a lot of people do tell us that their rebuttal is like, well, yeah, you guys have a huge influence, which I understand. But if you don't have a huge influence, to start kind of like cultivating that audience, because you only need a couple thousand people to be watching you to raise money. You don't need millions of followers. Like the people that we raise money from is from a very tight knit group of people that we've like cultivated here in LA. Yeah. So I would encourage people, whatever Gary Vee says is like, whatever you're doing every single day, just start to record it. You don't need to plan content. Like you're doing acquisitions, you're going to rental properties, you're going to listings, record that. People want to see that. They don't always see that on HGTV because some of that stuff is planned. So if you can be the person that shows them behind the scenes, that's really enticing to people.
I mean, it doesn't even have to be really an entrepreneur. Now we found a place, I think, there's people who have made quick money potentially from being an influencer or being a crypto mogul, and now that's turning sideways. So there's so many, or an actor or things like that. So find people who maybe know how to make money in their field. For us, like that was our network. We have influencer friends, actors friends, and we're like, okay, let's reach out to them. We know they've been able to make that money, but they don't know how to build wealth and make that money, keep making money. So you would actually be, and then also just, my sister, my cousin, and you're like, a lot of people have 50K saved and they're like, okay, but what am I going to do with that? Especially with everything down right now. That's why I think you should view everything as an opportunity. So many people are scared. If you have the right knowledge and you built up and people trust you, right now there's not anywhere good to invest. People are not making money in the stock market. They're not making money in crypto. So when we come to our investors and we can offer them returns that they can't get in those other places, it is an opportunity. Yeah. So always trying to see okay, obviously there's a lot of problems, but how can we make this into an opportunity for us to raise more capital and things like that? So with your syndication model, so are you buying properties that you're going to add value to, that way you can refi out? And when you're going into it, are you guaranteeing that return in a certain amount of time?
We guarantee this rental return every year for your investors in a contract.
So it's a little bit different if you are raising money and giving a mortgage on a property. Okay, so if you're giving a mortgage on a property, which you are in your flips, then there's an expected rate of return and they know exactly how much money that they're going to make. When they're investing as equity into a deal, it's 100% based on the performance of that property, not based on your guarantees or you're warranting any sort of specific return. So it's like, hey, if you went and bought stock in Tesla, right? Like you don't know, they're not going to guarantee you what the returns look like because you don't know. It's going to be dependent on how many cars they sell and make sure that nobody has a #MeToo movement in the upper management, right? Like or Elon doesn't smoke a joint on live TV again. Right? Like there's a lot of variables that can affect what's going on with the stock price. And that's the same thing when you're dealing in equity of a deal or equity in a company, and which is exactly what we do with syndication. Is somebody invests in an LLC and then that LLC owns the property. So if I'm going to buy 123 Main Street apartments, I'm going to create 123 Main Street LLC, and they invest into the LLC and they wire money into the operating agreement into the operating account of the LLC, and then they get a K1 at the end of the year as if they're a partner in that LLC. So you can't guarantee there. You guys, with flips, and if you have one person and they're secured by a mortgage and a promissory note, then yes, you can say, hey, here's exactly how much you're going to make.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. Yeah. You scared us at first. I was like, wait a second. We're really guaranteeing everybody.
But yeah. I mean, we also because we are young and so we're like, we want to let them know, we have capital that if worst case scenario on this deal, it goes south, I never want my name south. So I'm like, I guarantee you my own personal income.
You're too young. You got too many years ahead of you. You're going to do way more deals. Like reputation is everything in this industry. Like I'm actually selling a building today. It's the first, technically the second building I've ever lost money on, but it's an opportunity cost. It's costing me way more in headaches and nightmare, and just I got a partner that I got to get rid of on it. And so I'm going to write a check. We're going to lose about $1.1 million on it. My investors aren't going to lose any money. I'm going to lose a portion of that money, and then the partner is going to lose a portion of that money too.
Sometimes you have to cut your losses.
Yeah, exactly. And the opportunity cost of me getting rid of that deal is going to open me up to make an extra $5 to $10 million this year because of not having to deal with that property anymore. So you got to weigh some of that stuff out. But my investors would never, ever lose. And I know your guys' investors would never, ever lose money. They'd always be taken care of. And the first deal I ever lost money on was a smaller deal. I lost like 40 or 50 grand. And the equity investor should have lost money. And they didn't get the return that they wanted either. And just by doing the right thing, I said, hey, man, we got to sell the building. Again, opportunity cost. That was 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm going to give you all your money back. I have another deal I'm taking down. I'm going to give you equity in that deal. You don't have to bring any money. And that's going to be your return on investment for me screwing up on this other one. And I did the right thing by him. And guess what? Now he's like one of my biggest fans, telling people about how I always do the right thing. So you always got to look after your investors first. That is by far the most important thing in this business when you're bringing on private money.
Yeah, especially because the word of mouth is so huge. Like the second you make one person money, they're like, oh, the girls made me money. You guys got to check this out. I'm getting 10% returns. And that's so, so valuable. So I would rather cut that loss and be like, I lost 10 grand there. I'm going to pay my investor out than potentially lose, so many people, or like people start, posting on, all of a sudden there's a Reddit of Kinsey loses her investors' money. I'm like, oh God.
You don't need that. Yeah, and so, and here's the other thing that you guys mentioned before is like, it's hard to go from, hey, I'm going to have your money back in 6 to 12 months to all of a sudden I need 5 years. Everybody thinks that they want their money back. They want to see it cycle. That's more of like a confidence thing more than anything else, right? As soon as you make payments to them and they know that their money's secure, that's good. One of the things I tell people, and like I have people right now saying, hey, I want to see how the market shakes out and I want to, before I throw my money around, blah, blah, blah. And first of all, I think that's a scarcity mindset. And I think it's stupid to try to time a market. I can assure you that the grand slams that I timed out were some of the worst deals I've ever done. Like this one that I'm selling today, like I thought it was supposed to be a grand slam. The other ones that are base hits that are just, I'm doing deals just because I'm trying to get base hits. Like base hits win baseball games, not home runs, right? Base hit after base hit after base hit after base hit is what scores runs and wins ball games. It's not hoping somebody hits a grand slam to finish the game off. No, that's very speculative. It's just recurring, doing good deal after good deal after good deal. And guess what? Some of those base hits turn into doubles and triples and home run, right? But if you're looking for home runs all the time, chances are there's something that's going to burn you on that deal. So be aware of that. And I educate my investors and I tell them that. I was like, listen, that's a scarcity mindset. You want your money deployed. Look at how much interest you're going to lose out on while it's not being deployed. What if the bottom of the market's 3 years from now? And what are you going to do? You just sit on that money for the next 3 years?
And I kind of remember 3 years ago, we were all saying the same thing. Like, oh my gosh, we're going to have we're always in that.
And that's what sells tabloids. That's what gets clicks on social media. That's what gets clicks on different ads and stuff. Like it's talking, like Time Magazine, they ran their first negative cover on their magazines in like 1946 or whatever the hell it was. And now it's something like 90% of all their magazine covers are all negative. It's all talking about horrible, horrible things because they sold 7 times as many magazines when they had that negative cover versus when they had a positive cover. So when you talk negative, way more people open up.
Which is scary because I think the times that we're in now, like genuinely the economy is going to be affected, unfortunately, by social media. We've seen, the power of social media. And so what I've seen when even we're raising capital, we're talking to friends, is like everybody's scared. Oh, no, interest rose, so I'm going to wait for the crash in 3 months. They're all, because they saw this online, they're convinced that's going to happen. So really, it does slow buyers down, and it does like have this like small effect. But people that years ago, we didn't have such a strong effect. But now you go on TikTok and Instagram and every day you see this information, and we didn't have access to that kind of information before. So it does affect, I think, the economy by people's mindset just from negative feedback online.
It's not about what actually happens. It's about the perception of what happens, and that perception turns into reality, So here's what I do. We're raising money right now on some deals, recapitalizing some things. We're looking for some new acquisitions, and we get people saying the same stuff. And the reality is like, hey, no problem. If you need your money back, give me 90 days heads up and I'll swap you out either with my own money or I'll bring in another investor. Now you have to forfeit your equity, right? You can keep whatever returns have accrued while I pay those out, but just give me a heads up 90 days and I'll swap you out. And you know how many people have ever been swapped out of all my deals? Like legitimately, I've raised over $100 million of private money, not institutional money. I'm talking mom and pop, $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 increments. $100 million. I've had 2 people ever ask for their money because they had a life circumstance occur. And all of them are set for 3 to 5 years out, right? Like that's the mindset. So they just want to know that they have liquidity to their capital should shit hit the fan in their life or anything else. But the reality is 3 to 5 years passes very quickly.
Right.
So do the investors get like statements every month or every year, or what do they get to keep them knowledgeable and understanding that the investment is still doing well? Like, do they get reports?
Yeah, we give out quarterly updates. So it's a quarterly report. We just put kind of like a PowerPoint presentation together. It's, 10 slides long. It shows what the occupancy is, what the budget's been, where we are on rent collections and all that kind of stuff. And about how, we give them some metrics. Here's how much of the percentage of the renovations have been completed or the build out's been completed. Here's what the occupancy percentage is. Here's what the delinquency percentage is. Here's some updated pictures. Here's the listing link, to apartments.com or whatever. And we give them that information, and then we make distributions, which is payments, right? Quarterly payments to them as well. So that way we don't have to do it on a monthly basis because that would be a full-time job. But we do it 4 times a year.
Okay, so kind of just so I understand of the structure of your deal. So say I'm an investor. You, Tim, are coming to me, Kinsey, and you're like, you're trying to raise money from me. How would you, say you have a complex, kind of walk it through as if you're trying to get me as your investor?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't make it a big deal, right? If you make it a big deal and you're like, well, Kinsey, I think you should go and talk to your attorney and bring your CPA in for this meeting and let's do a conference call. They're like, holy shit, I didn't even know it was like that. I thought I was just looking at a deal, I would send you a text message probably. And I'd say, hey, Kinsey, I have some smoking deals that I'm looking at, right? Some really good projects, apartments that will be closing in the pipeline in the next 90 days or so. You sitting on any cheddar? How much cabbage you got? How much cabbage you looking to deploy?
Cabbage.
Right, and I make it a joke, right? And I have fun with it.
Yeah.
And if you don't make it a big deal, it doesn't become a big deal. And they're like, well, actually, yeah, man, I just sold this project over here. I'm sitting on a couple hundred G's. I'm looking to deploy it. What have you got? Keep me posted, right? So now when you reach out to them, when you actually do have a deal, or as it gets through due diligence and you're a little bit further along, then they're expecting your phone call, So that's number one. I would plant the seed early and kind of dig your well before you're thirsty. Whether you have deals or you're not, even if you're starting to look at deals, I would just tell people, hey, over the next 90 to 180 days, I'm looking to start taking down some apartment buildings, and I'm seeing a lot of really good deals that are popping up. Is that something that you'd be interested in talking with about? Would you be interested in passively partnering up in a deal like that on the money side, right? And that's hey, they don't want me to do anything, passive, right? Partner up, I'm going to get some equity. I like that better than lending somebody money or loaning somebody money. I'd rather partner on a deal. And on the money side, so it's not a question mark what value they're looking for from me. They want my money, So there's no question marks. And then when that deal pops up, I'd say, hey, Kinsey, I have a deal. Right? I underwrote the whole thing. We're through the due diligence period. We're about 45 to 60 days out from closing. I would send you I'd send you an email with some bullet points. That's 5 bullet points. Hey, here's how you get paid and all this stuff. And then I give you a 2 to 3 page summary, an overview of the deal and of how you get paid. And then what I do is I host a webinar, right? I like one-to-many activities. Instead of having a phone call with every single investor and burning up hours and weeks of my time, I would rather do a webinar, have everybody come on there, record it, and then disseminate that. And that way I spend 1 hour and get everybody the information. They can watch the video. And especially with your guys' following, that's the way it should be done. There's no reason you should be on a phone call with everybody.
Do they ask questions during that?
Yeah, I know what the questions are going to be. And so we hit on all those in the presentation, but naturally they do have additional questions. What about this? What about that? And I have a partner who answers all that. He's much more detail oriented. I'm more presentation, right? And the marketing kind of guy. Yeah. And so he's more detail oriented. He's an attorney. I brought him in because it made my life way easier. So here's the key. The key is investors are asking themselves 3 things. What is the asset? Okay. Cryptocurrency, harder to raise money on right now. Stock market, a little bit tougher to raise money on. A tech startup, a little bit tougher to raise money on right now. You know what's everybody's confident and comfortable investing in? Real estate. A brick and mortar, tangible piece of property that they can see, feel, and touch, right? It's not difficult to overcome the first question, which is what is the asset? It's a piece of rental real estate in a B-class market of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, whatever the hell it is, right? Second thing that they're asking, what is the return? And there's 2 parts to this. One is the reward worth the risk? Okay, so if they're getting paid, 10% for a new construction deal that everything has to fall in exactly in line over the next 3 years of time, is it worth it? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Maybe they want a higher return for that risk. Or if it's a totally stable A-class area, 99% occupied, 100% collected, and has upside in it, you might be able to get away with a 4% or a 5% or a 6% return, right? Because it's seen as a more stable, less risky type of investment. So that's the first part of the return side. Is the reward worth the risk? And then the second second thing is you got to pay attention to their opportunity cost. If they're a hard money lender and they do this for a living and they're used to making 18 to 24% per year on their money, if you go bring them something at a 6 or 8% return, they're probably not interested. At the same time, like my dad is like the most conservative investor ever. Like if he can get a 2% return, he'll take it. He thinks 6 to 8% is too good to be true on his money. And so you have to understand who your audience is and what the opportunity, what are they comparing it to? There's some people who invest in my deals who don't even get a return, a fixed return. They want the depreciation because they're going to save enough money in their earned income to offset what all the returns would be anyways. They're either going to write a check to me for $100,000 or they're going to go to the government for $100,000 and never see that money again. At least with me, they get equity in the deal and cash flow and depreciation and future returns as we pay it off. And so that's the second part. So number one is what is the asset? Number two is what is the return? And number three is, am I going to get my money back, right? Is the character of the borrower. They're looking at you saying, hey, does Jessica and Kinsey, do they have the fortitude to repay me my money? If shit hits the fan and this market goes to zero, which if it's cash flowing real estate, it doesn't ever really go to zero. You can always write out the market, right? But it goes and they lose my money. Are they willing to go work third shift at friggin' Taco Bell to make sure I get my money back? Are they willing to give me equity in the next deal to make sure that I get my money back? Are they willing to forego fancy trips and, all the luxuries of their life in order to make sure that I get paid back and before they start buying more cars and shit like that? And they're asking themselves that question. And that's something that takes time of character development and conveying that and doing deal after deal after deal and paying your investors back, paying them in full, paying them early, paying them on time. And when shit hits the fan, because it always does, communicating that shit hit the fan, but you've got it covered. Here's the plan in place, even though things went south and things had a lot of those conversations when COVID hit. And although a lot of the investors, the timelines got dragged out and the returns maybe, when COVID hit, I was buying heavy value add deals that were 40% occupied, that we had a clearing house of all the other tenants and renovate the entire building. I'm thinking about a 105 unit building that I bought February of 2020 and then COVID hit 6 weeks later. When you're doing heavy value add and they put an eviction moratorium in place for 16 months, and you can't kick out tenants, imagine what that's like. Imagine not being able to renovate because the supply chain is completely derailed, or the entire labor force isn't working in the trades because they're getting paid more money to stay home from the government than they are to actually go to work. So imagine that perfect storm of a heavy value add deal that completely kicked us in the crotch when COVID hit. And so guess what I did? I had that conversation with the investors. Here's what we're dealing with, guys. It's going to be a longer timeline and budget's probably going to go up because of all these holding costs that we're going to have. And I can't tell you when it's going to end. And thank God the market got stronger and offset a lot of those other costs. But that's a conversation I had with my investors. And because I punched it in the face before it could punch me in the face, it built more credibility with those investors. And now they're like, dude, you guys are young enough. I'm young enough, right? I just turned 37 last week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. But it's still, I have enough, you could do this business until you're 80, until you're 90, until you're 100 years old. We have enough bandwidth where I'm seen as the retirement account for a lot of my investors, they're going to invest with me for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And you guys are in that same position where you can say, hey, I'm your retirement. I'm going to keep your money deployed. And I'm going to keep on cycling it because I'm just getting started in this. And I already know what I'm doing. And I'm going to do it at a higher volume and do it better and da-da-da. It's going to be more profitable. And that's a cool conversation that I think young people can have with their private money investors of, you can grow with me, and there are people who were early on invested with me. And because they believed in me early on, they get first crack at the best deals. They get, the short-term loans at a little bit higher interest rate that's quick in, quick out, and they get some really big pops from me. And they get first right of refusal in order to come into each new project because I appreciate them and they believed in me when a lot of other people didn't. And because of that, that grows. So hopefully that helps kind of give you a little bit of a framework for raising private money.
Yeah, I have one point on this. I'm learning so much. This is incredible, Tim. Thank you so much. I hope the audience is learning a lot as well. But so when you said number 2, I think it was the returns. So how you said you can't guarantee returns. So in that conversation, what is it? You're going to say, ideally, we're looking at 6 to 8. Would you give a range? What's that conversation?
Yeah, so we always say either projected returns or targeted returns. And there are 4 ways that, actually, I guess, if you want to, we'll talk about depreciation here. All right, so here's how it's structured. I go and get 80% of the money on a given deal from a bank. All right, and the bank's going to give me 80% of the money at a 5% interest rate. The other 20% of the money is going to come from my private investors. So let's say I'm doing a $1 million deal. $800,000 comes from the bank. 200 grand comes from my investors. That 200 grand, I'm going to tell my investors they'll pay an 8% return. That 8% that I pay my investors is essentially like an interest reserve. The same thing that I would do, it's a cost of the deal. It's a holding cost of the deal, And to me, just like the flooring costs this much and the roof costs this much and the paint costs this much and the taxes are this much, my interest payment to my investors is calculated into the deal. So although you can't guarantee it, and although it's a preferred return because it's backed by equity, which is kind of convolutes the whole thing, I'm still paying a fixed return. And so my investors in the deal that I'm losing $1 million on today still made 10% every year while their money was invested in my deal. That's a worst case scenario for my investors. So that's number one. They get a fixed preferred rate of return. It's usually 8 to 10% depending on the deal. The second thing is then they get equity, and the equity pays them in 3 different ways. Number one is the cash flow. So let's say I buy something that's cash flow, and I buy it and I renovate it and it's all fully occupied, and I cover all the operating expenses and I cover the mortgage and I pay my investors that 8% return, and there's additional cash flow on top of it. Let's say there's another 10 grand a month on top of it. The investor would get their percentage of that extra 10 grand a month. So let's say they own 30% of the deal. They would get an extra $3,000 a month on top of their fixed preferred return. Does that make sense? So it actually takes their return from 8% and could push it to like 11 or even 12% annualized. So there's a fixed return, there's the cash flow that comes from it, and then there's the equity, right? What is the equity value in this deal? And so let's say I bought that deal and I'm into it for $1 million. Now that it's fixed up, now that it's fully occupied, it's worth $1.4 million. So if they own 30%, there's a $400,000 spread there of the real value of the property. So their 30% is worth about 120 grand. So that's not real money that they receive right now, but it does build their balance sheet. It builds their personal financial statement, and they can add it to what their net worth is. So when they get all their money, let's say we sell the building, they would get their money back, the 200 grand, and they'd get that other 30%. So another 120 grand on top of it, on top of the fixed preferred return and on top of the cash flows that they made in that time, right? So you're seeing like how you can start putting this toe to toe against something else, and like it smokes everything. It's got tax advantages. It's got predictable revenue and cash flows and dividends, right? It's got the equity growth, principal pay down. If we hold on to this property and we pay it down to $500,000 and then it appreciates to $2 million, then there's $1.5 million of spread there. You following me? So let's say I hold it for 5 years or 7 years. Now there's $1.5 million. They would get a check for 450 grand, 30% of $1.5 million, right? So it's like, oh, damn, well, I can really build some long-term wealth there. Not only that, but going back to Jessica's earlier question is like, how does depreciation work? They also get their 30% of the depreciation on that deal. All right, so if you own a single family house, and actually apartments fall under this, even though it's zoned as commercial, it's a residential piece of property, but residential property depreciates in 29 and a half years or something like that, or 27 years, maybe?
I think it's 27.
I don't even know. I should probably know this,
yeah.
But it's like 27 and a half years or whatever it is. So that means if you take a house or a building, let's take our $1 million example. You take a building for $1 million, you can't really depreciate land value. When you look at like an assessed value of a property, there's the land value and then there's the building value. You can only depreciate the building value. So let's say the land value is worth 100 grand, the building's worth $900,000. You can depreciate that and you get about 3%, maybe a little over, maybe 3.5% per year in depreciation. So 4% of 900 grand is $30,000 a year in depreciation.
So that's the tax write-off.
And that's a tax write-off. So that can be used to offset the cash flows that are coming in from that property. Now you'll probably see in a lot of commercial venues. And you can do this for single family. It's just sometimes it's not cost effective because it costs money to have this study done. But there's something called a cost segregation study. Okay? Cost segregation means they separate out the costs of the building. So they say, hey, I know you get to depreciate this over 27 and a half years, or 27 years, but the mechanicals, my hot water tank's only going to last 8 years. So they accelerate the depreciation and they line item each item in the building. So they'll say, hey, the carpet's going to last 3 years. The mechanicals are only going to last 8 years. The roof's going to last 20 years. The windows are going to last 15 years. Whatever the number is. You have somebody else, a third-party company that'll come in, they charge you a few $1,000s to do it, and they separate out every line item of everything that took to build the building. And because some of these things have shorter lifespan, you can depreciate it over 3 years or over 8 years instead of depreciating it over 30 years. So you can front-end load a lot of the depreciation. And in apartments, a general rule of thumb is you can depreciate about 25% of the value in the first year when you do a cost seg. So instead of getting 30 grand of depreciation, you can do a cost segregation study, accelerate the depreciation, and take about $225,000 to $250,000 $50,000 of depreciation the first year. So in this example, when somebody brings in 200 grand for the down payment, I could say, hey, I'll give you 250 grand of depreciation, and I'm not going to pay you any return, but you still get 30% of the equity in the deal. So now they're using money that they would be paying to the government, right? And they get it, they're able to offset almost all of it with that $250,000, depending on the tax bracket and everything. They're able to offset a big chunk of it with the depreciation that I give them in year one. And then there's no cost. And now I'm not having to pay 10% on that $200,000. Now I could pay zero. So now it allows me to get into a deal that could be a little bit tighter of a deal. Might have been a little bit tight on cash flow or something. Or in the market over the past 2 years, things have been super hot. So it's like, how can I decrease my costs? That's a way to decrease your cost of capital. So now you're only paying 5% on 800 grand and it lowers your debt service, right? So now you can now buy deals closer to retail price because you're able to creatively structure it and offer depreciation. Did I totally mess you guys up on that, or did I explain that okay?
No, because we've heard it before. We know someone that invests is worth like $3 billion, and he always talks about depreciation in apartment complexes, and it started to click, but it makes a lot of sense when you're saying it. I'm wondering, so year 2 and year 3, what does the depreciation look like? You said it was like 20, what did you say, 27% or something the first year?
Yeah, you get about 25% in the first year.
And then what about the years to come? Is it still?
Yeah, and then it falls off. And there are caveats here where, like, if you sell the building in year 2, right, and you've depreciated it by 250 grand, now your cost basis is 750 grand. So if you sell it for $1.2 million, you have to pay taxes as if you made $450,000. Does that make sense? So it's recapture of the depreciation. That's why if you do that, you have to plan on either holding it long term or doing a 1031 exchange, which means you kind of like roll the money into another deal and just kick that tax liability down the road a little bit further.
That was such a beautiful explanation, though. I feel like, and anybody listening, obviously that was really complex. So if you guys have ever heard about depreciation in real estate, definitely watch some YouTube videos on it, because the more you hear it, the more you're going to understand. But a way to make it fun and for you guys is, one of the best things about real estate is the tax write-offs. And so you have somebody like Trump, hate him or like him, people were so upset he didn't pay his taxes, but actually he's a real estate mogul. So this is the rules. This is like what happens in the United States of America. You own real estate, you get to depreciate it from your taxes. So he was depreciating all of his real estate. So if that gives you kind of like an example. Which offset
all of his earned income for all of his other businesses. Here's the thing, like, the founding fathers weren't stupid, right? And the people who started the tax codes weren't dumb. They realized that real estate is a huge economic driver for the country. So they want to incentivize people to take risk and buy property. Why? Because you have to employ property managers, you have to employ contractors, you have to employ utilities workers, right? You have housing now where new businesses can come in, and all of a sudden all these ancillary support, gas station down the street, the convenience store and the grocery store all start coming up because there's people in this neighborhood, and it drives property taxes and it drives income taxes in a lot of other ways. So how does the government do that? The way that they do that is by incentivizing people to invest in real estate. And if you understand that since the beginning of time, civilization, wealth has been measured in land ownership, and the landowners are the ones who typically have the money. If you have the money, you typically have the power. If you have the power, you typically have the influence, and you can influence laws, including tax laws. And that is why the tax code is written to benefit real estate owners better than anybody else, even more so than traditional business owners, because the tax code's written that way.
And with those 4 points that you hit, like when putting me as the example of the investor, you hitting those points, I would be like all in. I'm like, take my money. So if you guys watching, if you guys can set up those 4 points, I mean, it's right. It really is like, wow, I get to offset my income. I get to build equity. I'm getting cash flow. This is such amazing like investment opportunity that you can't get anywhere else. So that's, I mean, I just learned so much.
Kinsey, we have a responsibility to educate people that this even exists. They only think that they can invest with Charles Schwab in a 401k or some other nonsense, right? And in the stock market. And they all getting clobbered right now. Like, I have a sense of duty to educate people as much as possible on this stuff, that there's other options. And I think with your influence, you got to be talking about it more, because people are begging for an answer. They're begging for a better option than getting just blindsided by the stock market nonstop.
Right. And so do you only take accredited investors into your deals?
Now I do. Yep, now I do. Early on, no, it was like anybody who raised their hand could come into a deal. Now I don't have anywhere near the social media following as you, but I'm seen as one of the more seen and visible commercial real estate investors in the country. And so because of that, I got a lot of eyeballs, and it's just cleaner and easier to operate if you only take accredited investors. There's a couple more hoops that we have to jump through on our side, but it limits our liability for how many eyeballs that we have on us. So now we're in a position where we only do that. And I would say anybody with a big influence should do that, but maybe, if you have friends and family, you can do deals with them too.
Are all your units rental properties?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say 85% of my portfolio is apartments. I got about 5% that are very unique short-term rentals. I have like a mountain lodge and some oceanfront houses, and I own an island that we have a bunch of cabins that we're building on it. Just doing some kind of cool, funky stuff like that. We're actually going to put a helicopter landing pad, so you guys got to come and visit and say hello.
Oh my
Did
gosh.
you say you own an island?
Yeah, about a 110-acre island in South Carolina.
Richard Branson over here.
Okay, wow.
I mean, my island's bigger than Richard Branson's, but I'm not here to compare.
Not gonna boast.
Wow, but I will be flying the helicopter to your island. Our next meeting is going to be me flying in, and we're meeting in person. So
Let's do it. But yeah, so I have a little bit of that stuff, and then I have a few office buildings. I have some retail stuff. I have some self-storage facilities. That's like 10% of my portfolio. But really, we're just focused on triple net lease commercial, like Starbucks, and medical office buildings, things along those lines. We do a lot of that, or we're looking to do more of that, and then apartment buildings. And I mean, like, I'm in a position now where I started out in tough parts of the neighborhood, right? Tough parts of the market, and C-class, D-class kind of areas. And as I got into bigger buildings, I got into better areas. I shed some of the C-class stuff. I don't go in war zones anymore. I'm selling all that, and I sold a lot of my smaller buildings, and we're just focused on really A and B class apartment buildings built in the past 20 years in the Southeast primarily, really the Sun Belt, anywhere in the Sun Belt.
wow, this is amazing. And so when you do the syndication deal, and you talked about a 30% equity split to the investor, what kind of, as the syndicator, what is your equity split for just, so this is saying that he has no money in the deal, he's raising all the capital. What piece of the pie are you getting as far as the equity?
Listen, there's 1,000 different ways that you can structure these deals. Traditional syndication, the operator only gets 10 to 30% ownership, and all their partners, and all the operating people, and all the people sponsoring the loan, meaning signing on the loan, people who found the deal, people who oversee project management, property management, asset management, all those different components all split 20% of the deal. I didn't really like that method. I didn't think it was fair, especially for how heavy the value adds were that we were doing, and we were the ones creating all the upside in our projects. And so we kind of took that and flipped it on its head. And we never took any fees though. Like in traditional syndication, they're called general partners. Those are the people who are the operators, right? The limited partners are the ones who are passively investing. So the general partners, we're taking all sorts of fees: acquisition fee, fundraising fees, asset management fees, disposition fees, some capital events fees, meaning like if they refinanced or something. And they feed the deal to death. And I didn't like that because you were kind of combative with the limited partners. And so the way that we structured it was I didn't take any fees, but we got majority of the equity. And I paid my investors regardless of the property's performance. In a traditional syndication, if the property's not performing, those limited partners, those passive investors aren't getting any cash at all. So I kind of flipped it on its head where I wasn't taking any upfront fees and I was still paying the investors no matter what, but I got bulk of the equity. But what that did is it allowed us to row in the same boat in the same direction because I got paid once the investors got refinanced their money back out. That was my payday. And it allowed me to then justify getting majority of the equity and still making it a very sexy deal for the investors, right? I'm going to pay you 8 to 10%, give you all your money back in a few years, and still keep you in for 20 or 30% of the ownership in the deal. But if I was buying a building in downtown Dallas and it was a skyscraper, and it was 100% occupied, it was stable, and it was a $400 million deal, and I needed somebody to write a check for $100 million, and they were willing to write one check, and I could just sit back, take some fees, and own 20% of a $400 million deal, I would probably do that too, So it depends on the deal and what kind of a deal it is. So if it's pretty stabilized, I would probably lean towards more of the traditional syndication. And if it's a heavier, lift, meaning needs a little bit more work and a heavier value add type project, then I think you as the operator deserve more equity.
Wow. I mean, this has been incredible. Have you learned a lot? I'm like,
literally, yeah. I mean, it's a lot to digest. I'm still digesting it, which I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
And we've had a lot of really.
And here's the thing is like, you don't need to know all this stuff today, right? Like I'm talking at some of the highest levels that I can, because if I talk at a low level, then I lose everybody who's watching you guys who, has already passed some of the low levels or entry level type stuff, So I'd rather make it, something for people to aspire to do and talk at the highest level possible so we don't lose anybody. And at the same time, understand like there's only a couple things that matter when you're doing real estate. And the revenue generating activities are finding deals, raising money, and refining your operations. That's it, right? Like who's on your team, making sure your standard operating procedures are dialed in, making sure your metrics and your key performance indicators and like people are performing the way that they're supposed to be performing on your team. Like that's operations. Finding deals, like I would go and find some course on how to find off-market direct-to-seller deals. And if you learn that skill in single family like I did, I was able to take those same methods and move it into multifamily and find big commercial projects that way. Raising money. If you can raise money on a single family deal, you can raise money on a multifamily deal, and you can raise money on a big commercial project too, right? And then continuously refining your operation. Although I talked at the highest level, I want everybody to realize like those are the skills that you actually need, and those are the only three things you should be doing: finding deals, raising money, and refining your operation. And just go and do a single family deal, and then go buy a duplex, and then go buy a quadplex, and then get into an 8 unit or a 15 unit or a 30 unit. Don't wait for a 50 or 100 unit building. Like the momentum is more important than anything else that you could be doing.
And that's what I was going to ask to kind of like close it up is, what is 2 actionable steps that you can give to the audience? But I think you kind of just answered that. I think like for the very, very beginners, would you say putting a little bit of money into a course, or would you say take that money and put it into a down payment, try to get your first deal?
Here's the thing, like it's biased, but I'm biased because I've seen it work, and it worked for me this way. I went and got educated. Right? Like I went and got educated, meaning I joined a mastermind, or got mentorship somewhere. That to me changed the entire game, because I can go and take $100,000 and put it into a deal, and then I'm going to get kicked in the nuts. I'm going to fail forward. I'm going to lose time. I'm going to lose money. I'm going to get all these learning lessons one way. But you have to do the deals too. But more importantly is I'd rather go and get the information on how to find the off-market deals and how to raise the money, so that way I'm never constrained by the amount of capital that I'm sitting on. And then I have people who are in a mastermind group who are willing to lend me, who are willing to joint venture with me on a deal. And I think a lot of people get caught up on kind of like the equity splits of, hey, well, how much equity do I get if I do this deal? The reality is I gave up 67% of the ownership in the first 250 doors, 250 units that I bought. 67%. And I didn't have a bunch of fees or anything like that. I got a salary of $3,000 a month when I first got started. I valued myself at $36,000 a year. What that did though, is it laid a foundation for me to go pick up 4,000 doors. Like I was willing to forego the short-term gains for long-term wealth building and long-term strategy. And I think that's a really important, it's not about this deal. Who gives a shit about this deal? It's what does this deal set you up to do? Does it set you up to do another 10 deals? And those 10 deals are going to set you up to do another 100 deals thereafter, right? So just go out and get the momentum. Go out and take down a deal. I would join some sort of real estate group, whether that's a local group, your local real estate investors association. There's a lot of regional groups that you can plug into, and there's national masterminds as well. And just Google search or look around on social media, ask on in different groups or on some sort of postings, and just say, hey, what kind of mastermind real estate groups are out there for people looking to do X, Y, Z? And I would find some of those and I would go and join one of those.
Do you have a course that they can sign up for if someone's looking to sign up for a mastermind course?
Yeah, I have something called Commercial Empire, which is a 3-day boot camp. It's done virtually. It's $1,000 and you get a recording of it and everything, but it's more for like 200 level. It's not really like an entry. I mean, we take a lot of our concepts, and one of the things that I'm good at, my mom was a teacher. Actually, my dad was a police officer and was a college professor as well. So I'm good at taking complex ideas and making them stupid 3rd grade simple. And so we're able to take complex commercial real estate and bring it down to a 3rd grade level where everybody can understand. I didn't go to some Ivy League school. I don't come from a family with a bunch of commercial real estate. I learned from the School of Hard Knocks of doing deals, and I come from the single family. So we liken a lot of it to single family. So I'm not saying it's not for somebody who's never done a deal, but if you've done a deal, you're gonna get a lot more out of that course than you would otherwise. And then the only other thing that I have is something called Legacy Family, which is an annual mastermind, and that's $1,000 a month. It's for people who are looking to build their real estate portfolios, and we have Probably half of it's multifamily, and then the other half is people who are rock stars in single family, looking to deploy money. They have traditional businesses. I have e-commerce experts. It's a lot of business development, more so in that one. Actually, something we just launched last month is something called Legacy Wealth Academy. It's $9.95 a month for a digital library of all different asset classes. So I have people from my mastermind come in and just Google search lwacademy.com, Legacy Wealth Academy. It's $10 a month. That's it. You can go in and I created my 3-day course. I did it in 2.5 hours, and I abbreviated it, gave you all the bullet points, all the nuggets. And so that way you can come in, if it's something you really like, then you can jump into the major course, right? And I have people who do mobile home parks and self-storage facilities and retail and office and short-term rentals and cryptocurrency and e-commerce. And so we have courses, master classes on each one of those things, as well as syndication, raising private money, all that. And they're abbreviated master classes. You're not going to learn everything, but all these people are badasses and some of the best in the country at what they do. I think that's probably the best thing if anybody is interested.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the link below if anyone is interested in that, because I think that would be, people like to start with something just to get them in the door, and like you were saying, the momentum.
It's like a cup of coffee a month, right? But it's like access to some of the best information. It's all value. And then each one of these people either has a course or, you can invest in their deals, but they're just doing it to, gain exposure and build their credibility in the space. So it's a ton of value, and they're all people who are part of my mastermind, so they've been vetted in some capacity. But that's a pretty cool product that we just launched last month.
So amazing. And
Wow.
I think you guys saw today, and our favorite part about real estate is the unlimited growth potential, that you could start with $13,000 flip and now you have 4,000 units, and there's so much growth and opportunity to move up if you just get started. So Tim definitely showed us that today, and that's so motivating. I feel like living your life knowing that there's always another step you can take, and it can be to 10,000 units. You can be a billionaire in real estate, and so if you just start today. So Tim, thank you so much. I mean, this was we've had a lot of really great guests, and I love them all, but I think I learned the most today.
Yeah.
That was wow, I really took a lot away from this. So thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to fly my helicopter to your island.
No, I love what you're doing. Keep doing it. I love that you guys are building equity, because equity, one of my early mentors told me this. He says millionaires and billionaires are made by equity in deals, right? It's not from fees. It's not from commissions. It's not from salaries or wages. It's from equity in deals. If you focus on the equity, the cash flow will come. The cash will come, right? The wealth will be built. So I love what you guys are doing. I think you got a great head on your shoulders, and I think you guys are poised to do some really, really cool stuff. So,
well, thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure to check him out. We're going to include his link below.
Yeah.
Follow him on Instagram. Check out his courses. He's obviously insane, and you can learn a lot from him. And make sure you guys subscribe, and we will see you guys next week on Blondes Building Equity.